So when you picture the Irish countryside, you probably imagine, rolling green hills, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Peaceful sheep, quiet roads.
Exactly, just this very idyllic, romantic tranquility. But right in the middle of that pastoral postcard sits Leap Castle.
Right. Which is quite a contrast.
Yeah, it's this 800-year-old stone fortress that is just practically dripping with a history of bloodshed, betrayal, and a spiked death pit hidden behind a holy altar.
It really shatters that whole romantic illusion of the countryside, doesn't it?
It really does. So today we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating video source detailing local Irish history and folklore. And our mission for you today is to explore the 800-year history of Leap Castle.
Yeah, we want to understand exactly how it earned its reputation as a place of just intense, unyielding paranormal activity.
Because it is intense. I mean, you are looking at a physical monument to violence sitting right in the middle of a paradise.
Exactly. And, to understand why it has the reputation it does today, we really have to look at the very foundation of the place.
Right, where it all started.
Yeah. So Leap Castle was built somewhere between the 12th and 15th centuries, and the history detailed in our source, it isn't just a collection of spooky campfire stories.
No, it's very real history.
Right. At its core, this is a tale of extreme human greed. It's basically a study of what happens when the obsession with physical property and ownership just consumes everything else.
It totally warps the minds of the people who live there. And I want to start right at the beginning because, well, the origins set a precedent that is frankly hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. The castle's very name was born from a deadly sibling rivalry.
Yeah, and that basically programmed the property's DNA from day one. So, according to the source material, the castle was originally built by the wealthy O'Bannon family.
Right, the O'Bannons.
And almost immediately, the two O'Bannon brothers found themselves in this bitter feud over who would actually own it.
Which, in the context of the era, isn't entirely unusual. Warlords and wealthy families feuded over land constantly back then.
Oh, for sure. But it's the mechanism they chose to resolve this dispute that makes the O'Bannon story just stand out so much.
Yeah, they didn't divide the land, they didn't take it to a higher authority, and they didn't even fight like a traditional duel.
No, they decided to settle it by going to the top of a rocky outcrop and just jumping off a high cliff.
Which is just insane.
It is. Whoever survived the jump, like whoever walked away from this literal leap of faith, would get the castle.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. It's like an extreme life or death version of siblings fighting over who gets the top bunk, but the bunk is an entire stone fortress.
That is a perfect way to frame it, honestly.
That's it.
It's basically a medieval game of real estate Russian roulette.
Right. It completely subverts the idea of noble inheritance.
Exactly. They weren't fighting to preserve a family bloodline. I mean, they were completely willing to end their bloodline just for the deed to a stone building.
It's all about ego.
It is. The competition was entirely about ego and possession. They were prioritizing stone and mortar over their own lives and the life of their brother.
It's so dark.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how this foundational act of violence over ownership sets the stage for the next 8 centuries.
It establishes a terrifying rule for Leap Castle. Like, this is a place that demands a blood sacrifice if you want to claim it.
Right, and the irony of that sacrifice is incredible. They throw themselves off a cliff for the ultimate prize, and do you know who actually won the jump?
Wait, yeah, do we actually have the victor's name?
We don't. The source material notes that the winner's identity is entirely lost to time.
Oh, wow. Isn't that incredibly poetic?
It really is.
Like, this guy essentially participates in an attempted fratricide for a castle, survives, and history just deletes his name anyway. The castle basically absorbed his identity.
Yeah, the individual survivor, the guy who supposedly won, didn't even get his name recorded in the history books.
But the shocking act itself gave the castle its name.
Right. It became known as O'Bannon's Leap, which was eventually, shortened to just Leap Castle.
It's a chilling detail. The individual winner was forgotten, but the act of the deadly leap remained.
The violence endured while the people faded away. And that perfectly foreshadows the horrors that would follow when the castle changed hands.
Because things just get worse from there.
Oh, much worse. The ruling families shift, but the obsession with the property and the brutality required to hold it only escalate.
Which brings us to the O'Carroll family.
Right, the O'Carrolls.
Because if the extreme competition of the O'Bannons was intense, it was really just a warm-up.
Oh yeah, the cruelty amplifies significantly under the O'Carrolls.
Right. So when the O'Bannons lose control and ownership transfers to the O'Carrolls, the sibling rivalry goes from a foolish, ego-driven cliff jump to outright sacrilegious murder.
Yeah, once again, we see brothers fighting over inheritance and control. We have two O'Carroll brothers, one named Tay, and the other known as Thoughtless.
And Tay decides he is the rightful owner. And he doesn't want a cliff jump. He wants a guarantee.
He wants it settled once and for all.
Exactly. So to secure his claim and eliminate any dispute, Tay murders Thoughtless. Now, the sources detail this murder, and it's not just an assassination. Thoughtless was a priest.
Right, a holy man.
Yeah. And Tay didn't poison him at dinner or ambush him on the road. He killed his brother right in the middle of saying Mass.
Inside the castle's own chapel.
Wait, a priest murdered by his own brother during Mass? That's not just murder, that's the ultimate desecration.
It is a violation of the highest order. You really have to consider the profound psychological and cultural weight of that act in medieval Ireland.
Right, it was a totally different world then.
Exactly. The chapel was meant to be the ultimate sanctuary, right? A place of spiritual reverence and safety.
Absolutely.
So to violently desecrate that space during the holiest rite, it shows a mind completely unmoored from any moral framework.
He just didn't care?
No, Tay believed his right to the property superseded divine law.
Hold on, though. I get the sacrilege of killing a priest during Mass. That is a massive historical taboo. But why does the lore fixate so heavily on this specific room?
Well,
Because the sources call it the Bloody Chapel, and they say Thoughtless's spirit still roams there late at night. Lots of castles had assassinations. Is it just the sacrilege of the priest's murder that gives the chapel its reputation?
actually, no. The priest's murder is the most visible atrocity, but it is actually what was hidden inside the chapel's architecture that truly earns it that name.
Oh, right, the secret room.
Yeah. When later generations investigated the Bloody Chapel, they found something built directly behind its walls, an oubliette.
Oh, geez. For anyone not familiar with medieval dungeon architecture, an oubliette is a specific type of nightmare.
Yes. The word itself comes from the French verb oublier, meaning to forget.
Because you just throw people in and forget them.
Exactly. It's a secret drop-floor dungeon, a hole in the ground where prisoners are thrown down into the dark
Yeah.
and quite literally forgotten about.
Just horrible.
But the oubliette in Leap Castle wasn't just a dark room. When it was finally opened, they discovered numerous skeletons at the bottom.
And they weren't just lying there, right?
No, they were impaled on wooden spikes.
Let's just pause and think about the architectural intent behind that for a second. A spiked drop dungeon built directly behind the walls of a holy sanctuary.
It's sickening.
The source material describes the space as a living hell. You have the ultimate desecration hiding literally inches from the altar.
It is a terrifying juxtaposition. If we connect this to the bigger picture, having a place of holy worship layered directly on top of a spiked dungeon is the perfect metaphor for the power dynamics of the O'Carroll era.
Right, it's like two different worlds.
Yeah. On the surface, you have piety, holiness, and the performance of righteousness with the chapel. But just behind the stone, functioning simultaneously, is unimaginable cruelty.
It was a mechanism for agonizing silent death. And think about the sensory horror of that. You are a prisoner, you've been dropped into pitch blackness, you are impaled but maybe not dead yet, and right above you...
You can hear the mass.
Yes, you can hear the chanting of a holy mass, you can smell the incense. The psychological terror of that setup is staggering.
It really is.
It makes you realize that Tay murdering his brother wasn't just some isolated incident of rage. It was a symptom of a family that had weaponized cruelty.
Precisely. The violence was institutionalized. And the tragedy of Leap Castle under the O'Carrolls is that this kind of absolute unchecked power acts like a black hole.
It just sucks everything in.
Yeah, it doesn't stay confined to the ruling family. The O'Carrolls were destroying each other over ownership, but that violence inevitably pulled in innocent bystanders.
Right, collateral damage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It bled out into the local population and captured people who had absolutely no stake in the property dispute.
Which, to me, completely changes the nature of the castle's legacy.
I also...
Well, it's not just a haunted house of greedy landlords anymore. It's a site of profound collateral damage.
Oh, absolutely.
And the folklore surrounding the spirits left behind reflects that shift. We see a completely different kind of haunt when we look at the victims. Take the Red Lady, for example.
Right. The Red Lady is a deeply tragic figure in the castle's lore.
Definitely.
According to the source material, she was a woman abducted by the O'Carroll family. She was taken against her will, raped, and eventually killed.
It's just awful.
It is. And now her spirit is said to roam the castle rooms, always carrying a knife in her hand, forever searching for revenge.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. Compare her story to the O'Bannon brothers, who willingly jumped off a cliff for power.
It's completely different.
Yeah, the Red Lady wasn't fighting for land. She represents the absolute powerlessness of the local people against these fortress-dwelling warlords.
She was a victim of an environment where the rulers felt they owned the people just as much as they owned the stone walls.
Exactly.
Right.
She is an anchor of trauma. While the brothers fought for control and ownership, ghosts like the Red Lady represent the powerless victims.
Right. While the O'Bannons and O'Carrolls were tied to the castle by their ego and their desire to possess it, the Red Lady is tied to it because the castle fundamentally destroyed her.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
And we see another manifestation of that destruction in the story of the prisoner known as Derby.
Oh, right. Derby's story is fascinating because it introduces a completely different kind of imprisonment.
Yeah.
So Derby was an English prisoner held at Leap Castle. And somewhere along the line, the twist is that he actually fell in love with one of the O'Carroll daughters.
But you don't get a fairy tale romance at Leap Castle.
No, you really don't. Instead of a daring escape or a tragic Romeo and Juliet ending, the environment simply grinds him down. Derby ultimately lost his sanity.
He just snapped.
Yeah, he was completely broken, and his ghost is said to roam the castle now, endlessly searching for a treasure he once hid.
It's a profound look at how an environment built on paranoia and violence literally breaks the human mind. Think about the types of imprisonment we are seeing here.
Right.
You have the physical, brutal imprisonment of the oubliette, where people are physically trapped on wooden spikes in the dark. But with Derby and the Red Lady, you see a psychological imprisonment that lingers long after death.
That is such an important distinction for you listening to grasp, the physical versus the psychological. Derby isn't haunting the castle because he wants to rule it. He's trapped in an endless loop of madness, searching for something he lost.
And the Red Lady is trapped in an eternal loop of vengeance, pacing with a knife.
Right. The extreme psychological trauma anchors their legends to this specific place just as strongly as the physical violence anchors the murdered priest to the bloody chapel.
The trauma is essentially baked into the mortar of the building. And for centuries, this was just the reality of Leap Castle as a private fortress of horrors.
But time does move on.
It does. And eventually, the O'Carrolls lose their grip, the castle changes hands again, and we enter an era that completely shifts how the property is perceived.
Right. Which brings us into the Derby family era. Or sometimes it's spelled Darby, depending on the historical record you're looking at.
Yeah, the Derby era.
So ownership eventually passes to the Derby family. A descendant named Jonathan Derby inherits the property, and he marries a woman named Mildred.
Mildred Derby. She's a really pivotal figure in this narrative.
She really is. Because she isn't a warlord, she isn't plotting assassinations, and she isn't fighting for control.
No.
She was deeply interested in the paranormal, and she actually took the time to actively document the ghosts and her own terrifying experiences living within those walls.
Right. Mildred's presence fundamentally changes the castle's legacy. For the first time, we have a resident who is an observer rather than a perpetrator.
That's a great way to put it.
She acts as an early chronicler. Instead of adding bodies to the oubliette, she starts putting these oral histories, the local legends of the Bloody Chapel, the Red Lady, the Mad Prisoner, into a documented format.
She treats the trauma as history. She brings the darkness out into the light, even if she couldn't banish it.
Exactly. By writing it down, she shifted the castle from a place of active murder to a place of historical observation.
But the Derby family's time there is cut short. In 1922, the family actually fled Ireland due to the ongoing rebellion.
Right, leaving the castle vacant and neglected.
Yeah, they abandoned Leap Castle entirely, and this begins a massive dormant period for the fortress.
For decades, this massive, blood-soaked structure is just left vacant. It sits neglected in the countryside, falling into ruin.
This is rotting away.
Yeah. It becomes a physical manifestation of a rotting history, just keeping all its secrets in the dark.
Which makes the next chapter of the story so wild. So what does this all mean for the present day? Well, it sits rotting until 1974, when a restoration project begins. And the incredible thing is, they actually make it livable again. Now, think about this. You've got a house literally built over spiked skeletons where brothers murder each other at the altar, and someone decides, yes, I will restore this and move in.
It certainly takes a unique mindset.
It's a wild psychological study in itself. The instinct is just to say, tear it down.
Yeah, but the current owner, a man named Sean Ryan, has fully embraced the reality of where he lives.
He really has.
From what the sources detail, Sean is immensely knowledgeable about the horrific history.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't hide from it. In fact, he actively allows paranormal investigators inside to document the ongoing phenomena.
And the phenomena are incredibly active. The sources mention whispering in the wind, banging doors, footsteps echoing through the halls, and even full visual apparitions.
Which raises an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. When you have a dormant mass grave that suddenly gets renovated, what happens to the energy there? Did the act of making the castle livable again, like the physical construction, the hammering, the changing of the space, did that stir up the spirits?
That is a central question when looking at paranormal activity in restored historical sites. Does human intervention reactivate the trauma?
Oh.
Or, as the source material quite pointedly suggests, do the spirits actually own the castle now?
Oh, I love that theory.
The human owners, the O'Bannons, the O'Carrolls, the Derbys, they all came and went. Their dynasties ended or were forced out. But the spirits remained.
You have all these historical figures who killed for the deed to the place, who threw themselves off cliffs to possess it, but in the end, the ghosts are the permanent residents.
Exactly.
Human ownership might just be a temporary illusion at Leap Castle.
The sheer volume of the imprints left behind, from the murdered priest to the forgotten victims in the oubliette, creates an environment where the living are vastly outnumbered by the echoes of the dead.
Yeah, the odds are not in the living's favor.
No, they aren't. And Mildred Derby recognized this when she started documenting it. She understood that she was sharing the space, not commanding it.
It makes you wonder what it's actually like for the current owner to share his morning coffee with an 800-year-old trauma imprint.
I can't even imagine.
Right. So why should you, listening to this right now, care about this dark Irish lore today? I think the big takeaway is about how history and trauma leave an indelible, almost radioactive mark on a location.
It really is a striking study in how human greed and the obsession with property can corrupt an environment completely.
It turned a genuinely beautiful, peaceful countryside estate, a place that by all rights should be an idyllic sanctuary, into a literal and figurative living hell.
Yeah. The O'Carrolls didn't just ruin their own lives and the lives of their immediate victims, they poisoned the well for centuries.
And the folklore surrounding it acts as a warning system. The stories of the Red Lady and the mad prisoner survive because human beings have a deep-seated need to remember trauma.
To point to a dark stone tower and say, terrible things happened there, do not forget.
Exactly. The architecture tried to hide the oubliette, but the cultural memory refused to let it stay hidden.
Which leads to one final, really haunting thought to leave you with. If we look all the way back to the very beginning of our discussion, before the oubliette, before the Bloody Chapel.
Right, back to the origin.
Yeah, we have the castle's origin, that deadly cliff-jumping competition between the O'Bannon brothers.
Two men willing to die just to say they owned it.
Right. And as we noted earlier, the winner's name was entirely lost to time. History erased his identity the moment he claimed the prize.
Right.
Considering the centuries of bloodshed, madness, and tragedy that followed every single person who ever tried to enforce their ownership over Leap Castle, does that forgotten name suggest a deeper truth?
It's a chilling idea.
Perhaps, in the end, no living person ever truly owns Leap Castle. Considering what happens to the minds and souls of those who live there, perhaps the castle simply claims everyone who tries to possess it.
It's like that massive, dark stone fortress in the middle of those rolling green hills isn't a prize to be won at all. It's a trap, just waiting for the next person bold enough to leap.